So here's something I've wanted to talk about for a long time. Vortex blasters. What is a vortex? These are Vortex. They use their own proprietary disc-based ammunition, which was a major problem for a lot of people. Everybody had their Nerf darts and they didn't really want to get rid of these, and then these come out, same people, same Nerf, but it just didn't really take off. A lot of people either didn't even give them a try or tried them and didn't really like them or didn't see a use for them. What I'm hoping to do is kind of give everybody an introduction to the Vortex blasters to kind of show people what these things are good for and what they're bad for, because there are a lot of things that these blasters can do that standard darts can't, and you can work that into your game. First, let's talk about the ammo. Now, discs itself are very resilient. It's pretty hard to mess them up to the point where a blaster won't shoot them. Meanwhile, just pulling out 4 different darts out of my box, this one's okay. This one's pretty messed up. You wouldn't want to fire it. This one's, it's probably okay. And this guy, well, it's functional. The problem I have with darts are they don't last very long. If you hit them against the wall too many times, they start to get weak in the head. If they ever get stepped on, they're completely useless, and you just seem to be buying darts all the time. If you ever go to a war, chances are you're buying fresh darts to start the war off with, or you're making your own Steffens. Meanwhile, these things can be stuffed in a pocket, they can be stepped on, they can be mangled, and they will still fire virtually every single time. The other thing is, this is a magazine, and trying to load one here, I'm actually pretty decent at this because I've done it so many times, but not too bad. But a Vortex magazine, if I have these all stacked up and I want to load them into a mag really fast, look at that. Super quick to do that with. And of course you can stuff these in your pockets and do whatever with them. They're really easy to carry, and they're far superior just in general use. Now, these get good ranges because they're discs, obviously, but the velocity is much lower than that of a Nerf dart, because obviously Nerf darts and even Mega darts have these heads that are far more aerodynamic than, the face of this disc here. So, darts will travel much faster, and they will be far more accurate than a disc, as accurate as a foam dart can be. That being said, discs will always seem to curve in the same arc every single time, and once you get used to that, you can put them exactly where you want them, even behind cover. If an enemy is crouched behind a box or flag or something like that, you can still hit them if you're good enough. That's one of the better things about discs. But also, because they're slow, but they still get good range, they make excellent suppressive fire. They hang in the air, and the enemy can see them, obviously. Now, if they're at, 40 to 60 feet, yeah, they can dodge them pretty much no problem. But if they're, 70 to 90 at the very tip edge of the disc's life, it's kind of hard to, pay attention to all of them. You see it, you know it's there, but you can't do too much about it. It's gonna hit you, or it's gonna hit near you. Darts, they kind of just go crazy after a certain bit, but discs are really good at that because they stay in the air, they keep the enemy tense. The other thing is, they're much wider than darts. These are much easier to hit targets with close range, where speed doesn't exactly matter, but width of the dart does. Now, Mega darts are one of my favorites for close range, but discs still beat them out. It's really hard to dodge these things. So if you have somebody point blank or at long range, you have a use. If you are a support player, you should love discs. They should be your bread and butter, because not only can you hit people if they try to get close to an objective, but you can keep them pinned down at long range just because of how annoying discs are. While these will probably curve off and go into, 40 feet that way, and these guys, well, they're hit and miss. These are pretty much consistently always going to lazily fly like this. Very, very nice. Now, what about the blasters? First off, we've got the Proton. The Proton is kind of like the standard $8 if you've tried a disc blaster, you've probably seen this guy somewhere. Nothing too fancy. Single load from the back. Pull that back, put a disc in, press either one of the levers on either side, chambers the disc, pull the trigger, fires. And it fires really well. Guy probably gets the best distance out of any stock Vortex blaster there is. And you can see I got this one for 75 cents from Desert Industries. I actually have a ton of these. I love modding them. They're pretty simple to mod, but of course it's kind of difficult to get into it at first because there isn't a plunger tube, it isn't about air delivery or anything like that. You've got a torsion spring, which is, you know, coil right there with a leg going that way and a leg going that way. And basically when you pull it, it tenses up, and then when you let go of it, it, you know, delivers all the energy. That being said, to mod this, all you have to do is increase the tension, the stock tension of when it's together. So by moving it, and if you look in the blaster, there's actually, where the thing is pegged, there's a lesser peg and a stronger peg that you can literally just move it to. But if you're smart, you'll take epoxy putty and move it to the like the nearest screw port, epoxy that sucker down, and you'll get insane ranges and velocities out of this for a disc blaster. This will actually keep up with my modded Elite Alpha Trooper with the 5 kilogram Orange Modwork spring. This will keep up with it. Also, yes, it's a single shot, but I've seen people who can get ridiculously good at this. I mean, I'm by no means practiced, and I can still rat them off pretty decently. Way faster than I can do like a Night Fighter or anything like that. But if you ever see one of these, just get it. If you go to thrift stores, carry one of these in your pocket. Chances are somebody's going to pull this back, let it back in, and try to fire, and it's not going to work because these things are full of locks. Now, this is actually one of the more reasonable ones because there's really only those two, the one that locks it back and the one that stops the trigger. But they can get pretty ridiculous, and we'll get into that because that's what a lot of people hate about these. And here's an example of one you probably don't want to buy, the Rip Shot. Now there's two blasters that are similar. There's the Rip Shot and there's the Ricochet. The Ricochet is unredeemable garbage. It's basically this part right here, a little bit smaller but still gigantic. It's supposed to be like the Jolt of the Vortex line, and it's horrible. Basically what happens is you pull this slide back and it pulls a spring back, and then when you pull the trigger, it lets that spring forward, which strikes a plate, which connects the energy to the disc, which shoots it out the barrel. And it's horribly inefficient. It gets, you know, decent ranges for a Vortex blaster, a little under everything else though, so there's no point to getting it. This guy is similar, except for instead of striking a plate, it's got a little tooth in there, which flings the dart. It's okay. It doesn't work very well, and of course you have to pull this back, and then after you're done firing, push it back, which is really annoying. It doesn't automatically return. Not sure why. That being said, this is the comfiest Nerf blaster I've ever held. I love the ergonomics of this thing. It looks very much like the original pistol from Halo. If it was spray painted silver, it'd look very similar. It's got dart storage up at the front, so you can put discs in there. They fit in there perfectly, and they pull out easily. Now, how do you fire it? You put a disc down in there, you push it in with your finger, which hurts because of this ridge up here. I've completely mangled my fingers because of that. You pull this back, and then you pull the trigger. Fires pretty hard. This is much better than the Ricochet. And then you push that back. Not very useful because you have to breech load it every single time, and that's really annoying. But there's one cool feature about this blaster, and hopefully it will do it the first time. But if you hold the trigger and pull this back, it'll fire the disc. So you can very much kind of quick draw it and fire it. Come on. Which actually gets better ranges, and it's a neat concept. In fact, they don't actually explain this anywhere on the box, but it's really cool. That is the one thing, because you can load it, you can hold it, you can run with it, and then pull it up and just kind of quick fire it off your hip. Not practical, but this is a fun toy to play around with, in all honesty. I'm not going to recommend you get it, but if you like Vortex blasters, this can be a hoot. And now we're talking. We've got the Vigil on here. This guy has an internal magazine and a slide up here and a ton of locks. This is where the locks start to become a problem, because if there's a disc upside down, it won't depress this thing right here, and it won't fire. And you can't pull the trigger unless all the locks are cleared. which is annoying. You can't ever dry fire it, and that's one of the reasons why all of these blasters have locks, is because dry firing it with those torsion springs is really bad. But it also means that most people hate these things, just like the little dart lock thing in the Strife that everybody has to remove in order to be able to fire more than 1 round a second. Yeah, you'll have to do that with all of these. So if you plan on getting into disc blasters, don't be intimidated. The Vortex stuff is pretty scary at first because it's different, but once you get the hang of it, there's no problem at all. In fact, I've taken apart a fuse fire the day I bought it, which was when it showed up on Amazon. I had one sent here, and I opened up the same night and got a lot more power out of it just because I've done all of this kind of stuff before, and it's not like there was a mod guide for that. And the internals on the fuse fire are definitely not fun. But, to show you how this guy works, it's got 5-round internal magazine, so you can have 5 plus 1 in the chamber. Put discs in there, close that, pull that back, it automatically returns, and you pull the trigger. No slam fire or anything like that, but... And again, this is another thrifted blaster. This one was from Savers for $4. Works fine. Just carry discs with you, you can test them and make sure that they work before you buy them. And this is probably, I think it's a $15, $20 blaster brand new, and this one works great. So, yeah, you can definitely pick up some cool stuff in thrift stores. Now we're talking. This is the Diatron. See, I said it right that time. Same thing, thrifted blaster. I have another one, obviously, but these are all ones I just had that were unmodded and unpainted. $1.50 from Deseret. This is a $20 blaster originally. Very similar to the Vigil. 10-round internal magazine. And you put them in here, you close that up, and to prime this guy, again, locks all over the place, but you pull this handle forward, push it back down on that lock again, and pull the trigger, and it fires 2 discs at once. This is probably my favorite, or it's in the top 2, because A, it shoots 2 at once, which is really good for close range, and if you want to annoy somebody at long range, shooting 2 at once is a much harder thing to deal with than 1 at a time. And you could fire it one-handed. I actually prime this against my waist, and then slap it back against my waist, and pull the trigger. And that works out really well for me. I can get off a lot of shots with it. So 10 plus 2 is 12, and you can get 6 shots out of this guy. But if you remove all the locks, not only can you fire discs that are like this, or pretty much any way, you can also prime it like this and fire. You don't have to return it, and you can pretty much pull the trigger and dry fire it whenever you want. This is kind of a nightmare to mod, and honestly there isn't very much information for it online, but if enough people ask, I will mod this one for you because my other one has all the locks removed and it's fantastic. If you have any interest in disc blasters and you haven't seen a Diatron yet, please pick one up. Now, I really like the Diatron, but I think the Fuse Fire is my favorite. This is one that's later. It came from, again, the Zombie Strike line, like the Rip Shot. Came out this year, or last year, 2013, end of 2013, but it's very, very nice. Again, I've removed all the locks out of mine so I can do whatever the heck I want with it, and that was not easy when there wasn't a guide or anything like that, but I got it back together, got it firing, and of course I got a little more power out of that torsion spring. Out of the box, this guy underperforms compared to the original line of Vortex, but once you put more pressure on that torsion spring, you get a lot better performance out of it. The gimmick on this guy is, if you flip that switch after you put 3 AAAs in there, it gets 2 green LEDs up here for show, and of course it's got LEDs in there for charging these glowing discs. The other thing is, it kind of loads P90 style. It's got a 5-round magazine on the top of the blaster. Just kind of load them in like that till you got 5 in there. Pull this back. Usually it will auto return. There we go. It's a little, I need to lube this up. And then you pull the trigger. And again, man, I really need to lube that up. I haven't used this in forever. There we go. But yeah, the other cool thing about this is, of course, you can have 5 plus 1 in the chamber, but if you were in the middle of a firefight and you kind of had it sitting there and you loaded it, you can put another disc right in there if you had a handful. It does have disc storage on the front of it. It's very, very useful for that. There's not many Nerf guns that you can, Nerf blasters, that you can load darts into while keeping it up ready to fire. makes it one of the best blasters in my opinion. And I love internal magazines because the Vortex blasters are really good at scavenging, so it's really easy to just pick up darts off the ground and have a handful of them and feed this beast. That being said, again, full of locks, and the worst part, if you don't keep this thing lubed, and I mean really lubed, it tends to jam a lot. In fact, even with it just hosed down in silicone lube, carry a screwdriver with you. This is a secondary, or at least if you're using this, have another blaster ready, because chances are, every once in a while, and I mean like I have it once every 2 hours, it will jam, the magazine won't push the next disc in, you gotta get a screwdriver and poke it. It does happen, but if you lube it well enough and you use, you know, not chewed up discs, it will work every single time. And just the aesthetics, I have small hands, this thing fits me like a glove. I love it. This is definitely my top pick, and recently Amazon had it for $7, I believe. It's $7 or $9, single digit, and this was $20 when I bought it. Should have bought another one, but man, I love the Fuse Fire. If you're looking at getting any, you know, and you don't want to put too much work into it, Fuse Fire is a good choice. Now we're talking. This guy is the Praxis. This is your first of the magazine-fed offerings, coming with a 10-round magazine. It's pump action. It's not slam fire, but it is pump action, and it gets pretty good ranges. Again, similar to the Proton. Just load the magazine up, which again, you can do way faster than any Nerf dart. Put that guy in there. You can release it with any of the lever on either side. You pull that back, push it forward, and fire. And one thing I've noticed about this guy is it tends to curve less, and it's a much better war-worthy blaster than the other ones. It's very reliable, as long as you have all the locks removed, which this one doesn't. But if you remove all the locks out of this, so you can't, like, break the priming arm, which happens to a lot of them. Dart Wars goes through a ton of these things until I showed them how to remove the locks. But other than that, as long as you have it, you know, it's got jam clearing, which is really easy to do. Just point it down and pull that, and comes with a stock, which is similar to the Recon's old stock. It's still not very, you know, crazy, but it is very comfortable, and it's far more rigid than the last one. But it's useless. Doesn't hold a magazine or anything like that, so chances are if you're going to use this, you're going to use it like a shotgun. And it performs pretty admirably. Definitely, if you're thinking of getting a Vortex primary, this is not a bad option, and you can get magazines for dirt cheap now. In fact, most of these are going to be on clearance. And if there's one thing people are going to remember from the line, it's probably going to be how awful the Robotics 360 is. Now, I actually kind of like this blaster because I like internal magazines, but damn, is this thing just kind of a massive disappointment. I got this for $12 when Target was having a massive sale, and that's the only reason I own it. But you've got yourself a big, very heavy, even heavier than the 40-round Paragon disc blaster. It has a rotary magazine right here, which you put a disc in there, switch to the next chamber, put a disc in there, and keep going until it holds all 30. And the way this works is obviously the discs are sideways. When you prime it, it will... Well, didn't do it that time, but it's going to switch the disc up level and then fire it like that. And you can kind of already see the problem. This thing is very geary, is the word I would use, even though that's not a word. It's not fun to use like the Paragon is, which is a shame, because I actually wanted to like this blaster a lot, but there's just no way. It is much more comfortable, and it does have the internal magazine, but the problem with this one is if you load one in there, like say you're trying to load on the fly, you have to do it in order. You have to do it evenly, or else you're going to have blank slots. The other problem is that loading this thing is actually really uncomfortable. I didn't expect this, but when I had discs in my hand ready to load in there, trying to get them in there was really hurting me. I had to kind of hold it like this and load them in like that, and even then I was starting to get hand cramps, which is really unusual for any Nerf blaster. But yeah, oh god, just disgusting. Now, the one saving grace is if you crank that really hard, like as hard as you can, just slam it. It sounds cool, and it functions fine. It's very much intimidating if you just... Yeah. And again, it does have slam fire, so you can rattle them off as fast as you can pull a holder, fast as you can pump this. But yeah, unless you can get it for cheap, not recommended. And the worst part, don't even try to open this thing. Just don't. I haven't seen a single mod guide for it, and I was going to try, and it's not going to happen. No way. With the way that it, tilts the disc up from being vertical to being horizontal, and all the crazy crap that's in there, just don't. And last but certainly not least, the Nitron. This is not a stock Nitron. This is actually one that I bought online that I have a project for. That's about halfway done. Just imagine that there's a foregrip right here instead of a Magnus. This is kind of a teaser because I've almost done finished working on this, and yet I say it's only halfway done. But basically this was the flywheel full auto. It took, I believe, I think it was AA. No, it was C batteries. It took 6 C batteries, and the rate of fire and everything was just abysmal. It went patoo, 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 and the ranges were on par with everything else. Very disappointing, but once one guy found out, named Boom, which is why they call these Boom Nitrons, is that if you just shove a ton of voltage into that little pusher motor in the back, you can get an absolutely insane rate of fire. If I kind of just demonstrate right here. Well, that's the flywheel. Man, that's loud. But yeah, you can hear the pusher motor back here. It's just nuts. That's the reason why people like the Nitron. It does take a lot of work, and I suck with electronics. I'm not good with them at all. And after about 5 hours or so, I would say, I managed to get this guy actually working perfectly. And again, this is only halfway done, but if you're looking for something that's going to spit out something ridiculous like 400, 500 rounds a minute, if not more, this is the blaster for you. This is like a mag strike fire rate. It's really, really, really fast. And unfortunately, I haven't figured out how to get more distance out of it. I can make a wall of discs, but it's a wall that only goes like 60 feet. But this is a nice one to get if you're actually going to mod. And this is, again, an electronic blaster, so it's easier to do than most. It comes with a 20-round magazine. Hush you. And it can actually hold an extra mag back there. Yes, it can hold a 40-round drum up here, but I have tried to hold a 40-round back here while I've seen pictures of it being done by just wedging it in there and hoping it stays. I tried to cut this down so I could fit one back there, and it wasn't going to happen. It just falls right out. And if you're going to use 40-round drums in these things, you're probably going to want to upgrade the springs that hold the magazines in there because they like to fall out. And that pretty much covers everything, with the exception of the Lumatron, which is just a repainted Praxis with a Firefly Tech glowing mag to shoot glow-in-the-dark discs, and then also the Ricochet, which is garbage, and the only reason I'd ever own one is to complete my collection. That being said, hopefully I kind of showed you guys the differences between, discs and darts and where these things could actually shine as opposed to just using strictly darts for everything. They have, shortcomings, and they also have things that they could excel at. Personally, I do a lot of indoor wars, which is why I get way more mileage out of these disc blasters than anything else. That being said, if you're outside, probably not the best bet, It's not to say you shouldn't use them, but it's probably going to be way worse than I've already kind of shown it. I've seen videos of, you know, outside, you know, Pyragon usage, and it looks pretty cool. I mean, you just fling discs everywhere like a flamethrower, and they're, you know, hard to predict, and they're kind of hard to dodge when they're coming out that fast. But again, if you have an air gun or something like that, you can peg somebody pretty accurately at 70, 80 feet, no problem whatsoever. But hey, they have their place in the nerfing world, and hopefully Hasbro doesn't discontinue these. That's not looking likely, because like I said, a lot of people just kind of counted them out and didn't want them, and unfortunately they don't really seem to have anything planned for 2014 going on. The Fuse Fire, the Ricochet, and the Ripshot were the last three they were going to put out, which is depressing because they were all kind of lackluster with the exception of the Fuse Fire. But there was no big, huge blaster to go with all of them that could do lots of different cool things. Like, oh, I don't know, what if we had a nice, like an actual like P90 with this kind of magazine fed with double stacked and all that crazy stuff, slam fire? That'd be really nice. But nope, we're never going to get that. And it's depressing, honestly. But I hope I've kind of enlightened everyone on what these things can do, and I kind of explained a little bit of what their mod potential are. Again, don't be too afraid. Put on a camera or take your cell phone or something as you're taking it apart. You know, be really careful with them so you can always put stuff back together. It's always really good. And that's pretty much all I've got for you. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have yourself a wonderful day.